I love this quote by Herschel Vineyard. He talks about getting the water right and how it's central to every aspect of life in Florida, and how we pretty much have to get the land right before we get the water right as well too. I love both of those things. So I'd like to start with another question. Here's another question for you. On the resources that you know personally, that you hunt or fish or get involved with, are the water resources right for that resource? You know, we've heard, thank you. That would be my answer as well too. And we've heard some great presentations today about Everglades and the Kissimmee River system and other water bodies, and it's all about how do we go about getting that water right. So who defines when the water becomes right? Is that the scientists, agencies, those kind of things, or is it the stakeholders and those kind of people? Well, it has to be both. And Dr. Netherland mentioned that. He very subtly mentioned that in the management hydrilla, you have to get the managers and the stakeholders to kind of agree in order to have a place that you can manage for. And I agree with that. I agree that that's the truth with everything we do about water resources as well too, that the stakeholders and the managers kind of have to agree in order to get the water right into the future. So those I think are really important distinctions. I got another question for you. If we use today's policies and the approaches we have today into the future, does the water get more right or less right in the future? If you vote for more, raise your hand. If you vote for less, raise your hand. Okay. Bottom line in all those questions is something has to change. So the question becomes is what has to change and how? If you know the answers to those questions, you're probably the most knowledgeable person in the entire room. So what I want to do is to try to provide some of those answers and to empower you to gain that knowledge and to give you some direction as to how you apply that knowledge to affect change. So, like I said, I'm going to do that all in 20 minutes. I'm going to skip that slide, too much text, but I'm going to move on to, I think that the connection I see between water restoration and groups like duck hunters and fishermen and those kind of things is I believe that wetland restoration is one of the most important things we can be doing long-term in Florida to get the water right. I'm going to make that statement right up front. There's other components to that too. Our sandy ridge areas, we have to recharge more water. We have to conserve more water in urban areas. We have to reduce our dependence for landscaping, and the water resources we use for St. Augustine grass in the urban areas is just atrocious, and that has to change. Things like Florida-friendly landscaping, those kind of things have to be a part of this puzzle, but I want to focus on that wetlands section. Historical wetlands in Florida, we used to have about 173 million acres of wetlands historically. A lot of that probably was part of the Everglades. We've lost about 94 million acres of wetlands in Florida over the long term. So let's review what our needs are for the state of Florida. What do we need from a water resource perspective? We need water treatment for improved water quality, and we need water storage for water supply, both for natural landscapes and for people. So there's certainly many others, but that's a simplified version. Treatment and storage. So now let's review the function of wetlands that we know from today. So benefit of wetlands, what? Treatment and storage. So we somewhere down the road we have to make this connection. Wetlands can provide valuable economic and natural resource system services if we let them. So that's the point. Now, the biggest key to that, and we haven't heard much about this today, is that we have to think of it on economic terms. It's one thing to think about it on natural systems terms, and that's all kind of the economic development folks kind of consider that to be the warm and fuzzy part, right? It's hard to sell a project today based on just natural resources terms. So what we have to do is look at programs and projects that have economic value, economic returns, and those kind of things. And my argument is that wetlands provides all the above. Some other terms I'd like to share with you too. Natural infrastructure. I don't know if you've heard that term or not, but that's the term used for like the value wetlands plays and an infrastructure component, how we deliver water, how we treat water, do all those kind of things. So integrated management. You know, we tend to focus on management as either flooding or natural systems or water quality or water supply, and we tend to compartmentalize all that. Integrated management means you have to do what's best for all of those together, that everything has an equal component. See, today, the priorities are, because of the political kind of emphasis on it, we respond to flooding more than anything, because if people's yards flood, they start calling, they'll call everybody. We need water supply for future growth. So those are the priorities. So the natural systems parts and the water quality parts tend to be diminished a little bit in most cases. So we have to treat all those on equal footing to make that work. And then the word sustainability, you hear that a lot. It's probably an overused term, but I'd like to define that for you a little bit. Talking about natural infrastructure, I'm sorry, you probably can't see that. It's hard to figure out what size text to use in a lot of these things, but natural infrastructure is defined as the interconnected network of natural and undeveloped areas, but it also says they provide a wide range of environmental, health, and economic benefits, such as sustaining clean air and water. And the natural infrastructure approach is a proactive approach, trying to protect those natural functions as we move forward. So I want to share an example of that with you. Here's some information. If we've lost 94 million acres of wetlands in Florida, and I just made some general assumptions. I can't support this scientifically at all, but if you assume there's only 1 foot of water and all that 94 million acres of water, then those wetlands would store about 30 trillion gallons of water. So that's the equivalency, I think, of that from a storage standpoint. That much water equivalates into 3,700 new 8 billion gallon reservoirs. So just to give you an idea about what that means from a water standpoint. I don't know if you're able to follow that or not, but what I'm trying to do is assign a water storage value to all those lost wetlands we've had in Florida. So potentially this equates to about $740 billion that we would have to build new reservoirs. From a treatment capacity, it's about $50 billion. And that doesn't even consider all the other benefits it creates, like habitat for ducks, wildlife, recreational benefits, all those kind of things. So what I'm trying to do is get you to think about wetlands not in the terms of natural systems, but in terms of economic evaluation. I believe that's where the answer lies in how we move forward in the future with a lot of the projects we want to do. Let's move on to sustainability. Sustainability is most commonly defined as that balance between economic growth, social and cultural needs, which is kind of part of where we fit in here, and then our natural systems approach as well. So water resources, I think, is one of the best things that fits in the middle of all of that. We have to have water for economic growth. Most of our natural systems in Florida depend on water, and also there's that cultural connection there with water. Pretty much, I would guess that almost everybody in this room has some affinity towards water, rivers, lakes, springs, wetlands, those kind of things. So water fits in between all of that. So the idea there is water means a lot more than just economic benefit. So now here's a definition of sustainability that not many people think about. What I want to communicate here is that prehistorically, sustainability used to be at a very high level. So this is early 1900s. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the level of sustainability from a water resource perspective, say even take the Kissimmee River system, Everglades, whatever water you want to, any water body you want there, and it's probably declined. And so today we're here at a lower level of what I would consider conditions for water resources. Now, most people, from a political standpoint, would try to convince you that the sustainable level is what we have today. Let's take what we have today and not have any more impacts. But what I want to tell you is that as local stakeholders, we should be looking at a sustainability level above what we have today. So the question becomes do we want that level to go up? Do we want it to stay the same, or do we want it to go down? Policy and our approach today says that it should at least stay the same, but we really say it's okay for it to get a little bit worse as we go along. That's what our environmental regulations, our legislation tells us today. So it's going to tell you that it's okay for it to get a little bit worse as we go along because future generations won't know any better, pretty much. But that's not the level of expectations I think we have as stakeholders and citizens. We want that to be somewhere closer to what it was historically. Like we're talking about the Everglades and Kissimmee River system. There's a higher level of sustainability there. You know, our expectations are not down here where we set goals for like water quality criteria or minimum flows and levels or things like that. They're not way down here that the regulations say they should be. Our expectations are they should be somewhere above that. Now, who defines where that should be is us. It's not like agencies like the Water Management District or DEP or the governor or people like that. We have to tell them what those level of expectations are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share an example with you of a process we've gone through in Winter Haven where we've set those levels of expectations and we've got those expectations adopted by both our city commission, our county commission, and the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program. And now we're moving forward with trying to find ways to reach those expectations and not just meet those minimum goals, those minimum standards. So there's a big difference in how we think and talk about those kind of things. So here we are in Polk County. The city of Winter Haven is located right here where the dot is, in between Orlando and Tampa. We're right here in the middle of the county. That's the county boundary. This is the general location of the Peace Creek watershed, the area that we've defined as our hydrologic unit. What's interesting about this is Lake Hancock that Eric DeHaven was just talking about is right there. And Tenorock that Dana Moxley was talking about is right up in this corner. So we're the Peace Creek watershed. This is the Saddle Creek side. And as those two watersheds come together, make the headwaters of the Peace River. So this is all kind of right there together. This is the headwaters of the Peace River system. As water flows out of Winter Haven and the Peace Creek watershed, it meets up with Lake Hancock and the water flow out of Saddle Creek, flows all the way down to Charlotte Harbor and discharges into Charlotte Harbor and out to the Gulf of Mexico. So anything we do up here is going to affect many, many people downstream. Another really important item is that we're also at the top of the groundwater basin too. Y'all probably are aware there's a groundwater divide that runs through the middle of Florida. And as groundwater percolates, it either flows underground to the east or to the west of Florida. And we're right on that divide. Do I have a, oops. Anyway, we're located right on this divide right here. So we're located not only at the surface watershed top headwaters, but also the groundwater headwaters as well. So it's a really important hydrologic area. So here it is again. You probably can't see these arrows. The colors didn't show up very good, but there's 6 major riverine systems that flows out of Polk County. And there's also the groundwater flows that flows out of Polk County. And it kind of leaves us with being able to, the only water we get to use is what we kind of keep around for a while. This is the boundary of the Peace Creek watershed. Kind of like we're looking at the Kissimmee River and the Everglades watershed, the first thing we did, we looked at what the natural hydrology was like back before we started messing with it. So this natural hydrology said that water percolated in these sandy ridge areas on both sides, and it all flowed to a valley area, which is right here in the middle, along that area, and then it all slowly flowed out of the Peace River system. I can't say this to this group, but I tell my local people that this used to be like a little mini Everglades system because it used to sheet flow across the landscape. It used to be a couple of feet deep, a lot of grasses and vegetation and a lot of habitat, but on a very much smaller scale than the Everglades. So that's how the watershed used to work, and that the natural infrastructure provided all the benefits that we needed at that time, of course. So let's fast forward to today. We have 40 miles of drainage ditch. We call this the Peace Creek Canal that now that's been cut through this watershed, so we drain this water away. We have urbanization in the Winter Haven area and then also along parts of the Lake Wales Ridge here. So we've paved over those recharge areas. There's been a regional aquifer decline. Things like mining and some agriculture use in the southwest part of the county have pulled down the aquifer, which affects us a lot. We've also lowered lake levels and done those kind of things. So there's this long list of hydrologic impairments that we're trying to overcome. So if we're going to get the water right, how much of this can we put back so that the water is right? That's the question, is how do we do that work? So to me, the question is not how can we meet minimum standards for water quality and lake levels and those kind of things. To me, that's not the right question. The right question is, how do we get the water right in a system like this? On top of that, so this is what's all happened up to this point. Whoops. And here's the conditions we have. The Peace River right below us goes dry pretty much in any given year. That even has a little bit below rainfall. I went and hiked the Peace River a couple of months ago. About a 3-mile section of river, totally dry. 30 out of 100 lakes are on the stressed lakes list or MFL list for this area because they're fluctuating way below normal. 40 of the 100 lakes are on the impaired water quality standard list. So this is a watershed that's got some serious problems. Part of us, we've lost about 29,000 acres of wetlands in this area. And on top of that, here's what's coming. We have Legoland just kind of opened up a couple years ago, so I hope y'all will come and visit and hang out in Legoland with us. But we have the CSX Intermodal Transportation Terminal that's moving from Orlando, is moving right here in the middle of this watershed. We're expecting about 2,000 jobs to be created, which is a great thing. There's a proposed Central Polk Parkway that's going to loop through this watershed that's going to connect I-4 west of Lakeland to I-4 up towards Orlando. And it's just going to explode this area with growth. So that's on the horizon. So we think that this watershed is going to transition from about 30% developed today to roughly 60 to 70% developed in the future. So I'll ask the same question again. If you follow today's approach, will this watershed get better or worse than it is today if we follow today's rules and regulations? And I think y'all know the answer to that. It's going to get worse. And the next question is are we going to allow that to happen? So my hopeful answer is no, but I tell you what, it's not for certain. The Sustainable Water Resource Management Plan is what we adopted to try to begin to counteract this level of thinking. What it says, and this is the plan that's been adopted by the City of Winter Haven and Polk County and Charlotte Harbor. It says, if the current approach to land and water management is followed, new development will result in additional impacts. It's a fact, guys. It's a fact. If we follow today's strategy into the future, it's going to get worse. And frankly, I'm just not really willing to let that happen. Here's the plan we adopted. Here's the cover for it. Adopted by, I think I mentioned the city, the county, the Charlotte Harbor and SSWA program. And now we're beginning to take it around other communities in the watershed to try to get their involvement as well too. Now, I said I'm not sure how much of this you can see. So here's an outline of the watershed area. And if you can see these bluer blobs here, those are proposed 7,000 acres of new wetland restoration projects that we're proposing in order to get the water right for this watershed. This is one of the biggest components of our strategy. So what you're hearing today is that a city and a county that are so focused on economic growth, we want development, we want Legoland, we want CSX, we want proposed parkways, we want the growth in this county to happen just like every other county in Florida probably. But we're going to do that in a way that's going to try to improve the watershed instead of allowing it to get worse. There's a huge lesson here, I believe, in how we move into the future. Local governments have control on where the development goes and how. The water management districts and DEP kind of control, what level of impacts it's going to have as we go along. If we use that authority, those two authorities together, then we can make things like this happen. We can take a watershed as it grows in the future, and we can restore historical wetlands and allow future growth to happen at the same time, All we have to do is kind of identify where those areas are, adopt those land development regulations to make that happen, and have agencies and groups that enforce that as we go along. I mean, I know that's oversimplified. I know it's a lot more complex than that, but it's a different way to think about growth. Because there's not enough money in government to build those big projects into the future, we believe that organizing future growth in a way that helps pay for that is one of the solutions about how we fund these types of projects. So when I talk to our environmental groups, I tell them, you may not like growth now, but growth is the answer about how we restore the natural system into the future. It's part of that answer. So what we think this is going to do, it's going to store about 27 billion gallons of water. So this is the equivalent of about 3 large watersheds. It's going to control flow out of the watershed through the drainage ditches. It's going to prevent flooding. It's going to restore habitat. It's going to recharge aquifers. It's going to treat stormwater and prevent flooding. And it pretty much is the best way we know how to put it back the way it belongs. So this is what we think, quote, gets the water right, as opposed to what we might be doing in the future. So the old process kind of focuses on individual projects and rules and regulations and those kind of things. The new process I'm recommending is for stakeholders to get together and develop goals for watersheds and water bodies, you know, to say, okay, the minimum's not good enough, so let's set the level at where we want this to happen at. We need to provide incentives for things like future development to help make that happen. Kind of, you know, you have your minimum standards and rules and regulations, but work with future development, farmers, things like that to set goals. And then things like in the Everglades, I know probably just enough about this to make me dangerous, but the payment for environmental services program that they're doing in the Kissimmee River watershed, I think is a really good example about how you pay landowners for environmental services that we don't have today. So, you know, for me, I'd rather pay a landowner to store that water than my agency or like the water management districts or DEP to have to do government projects, because the cost is like 5% of what you would have to pay to do a large construction project. So we need to take advantage of many of those opportunities as we have. We call this a blueprint for future growth. Yeah, though, by the way, both the City of Winter Haven and Polk County have changed our land development plans to be consistent with this plan. So we've adopted the strategies, even in the comprehensive planning part, to help make this happen. Oops. So here's a set of recommendations. In this new paradigm, this new way of thinking, local stakeholders have to get together. Not only people involved with like the United Waterfowlers groups, but also people that are involved with, you know, Sierra clubs, or people that live on lakes, or people that like to fish, or people like to paddle. We have to get everybody together to start defining what these future goals are that are above these minimum standards. And that's hard work. And that's why I love this organization. I think they're doing the work to help make that happen. You know, things like this, trying to give people the knowledge to kind of go about and providing that leadership in local communities, I think is where this work gets done. We'll see. Anyway, there's a whole set of recommendations there. I think defining these terms on economic terms as well as environmental terms is really important. I think then we start getting the interest of people like developers, commercial interests, those kind of things. We have to get them on board, because truthfully, that's what's driving the politics. You know, the development groups, agriculture groups, people like that have an economic interest in water resources are driving this discussion. If we can't convince them to be a partner in ideas like this, I think we're going to have a lot of trouble in the future. If we do the work this way, you know, I think the benefits are just totally outweigh the costs associated with it. There again, that integrated water management approach says, don't just focus on flooding and water supply, but focus on all the other benefits it takes into a value too. And that's really hard work to do. It's not easy to do at all. The science is not really up to speed with the effort we need to have right now about how to define that economic value. So we're at a loss right there. But I think if we if we start putting it back the way it belongs to make the water right, we're going to be way ahead of the game for future generations. And with that, I'll stop.